It was just another busy morning at the office. Phones were ringing, keyboards clattered, and employees bustled around, trying to keep up with the demands of the day. Among them was Lisa, a hardworking young woman who had just joined the company. She was eager to prove herself, but little did she know, her first few days would be far from easy. Lisa had been assigned to work under Mr. Thompson, a senior manager with a reputation for being ruthless. He was known for his sharp tongue and had little patience for those he considered beneath him. From the moment Lisa stepped into his department, he made it clear that he saw her as nothing more than an inexperienced worker who wasn't worth his time. He criticized her every move, dismissed her ideas without a second thought, and often humiliated her in front of others. One afternoon, things took a turn for the worse. Lisa was presenting a report when Mr. Thompson suddenly interrupted her. His voice was loud, his tone condescending. "This is completely useless. Did you even bother to check your work?" he scoffed, shaking his head. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at Lisa, who stood frozen, holding back her emotions. She had worked tirelessly on that report, double-checking every detail. Yet here she was, being belittled in front of her colleagues. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, but the humiliation was hard to ignore. Some of her coworkers exchanged uneasy glances, uncomfortable with how harshly she was being treated. But no one dared to speak up. Mr. Thompson was a man of power, and challenging him could mean risking their own jobs. What Mr. Thompson didn't know, however, was that Lisa wasn't just any employee. She was the daughter of the company's CEO. And while she had kept her identity a secret to prove herself through hard work, this moment was about to change everything. What would happen when the truth came out? Would Mr. Thompson regret his actions? Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave everyone in shock. Lisa sat back down, forcing herself to keep her expression neutral as Mr. Thompson continued his rant. Her hands trembled slightly under the table, but she refused to let him see how much his words had affected her. She had expected challenges when she took this job, but she never imagined she would be treated this way, especially not by someone who was supposed to be a leader. Across the room, some employees whispered among themselves. They had all seen Mr. Thompson's harsh management style before, but something about this situation felt different. Lisa wasn't arguing back, nor was she looking defeated. Instead, there was a quiet confidence in the way she held herself, as if she knew something no one else did. As the meeting wrapped up, Lisa gathered her notes and started to leave when she heard Mr. Thompson call out, "Lisa, stay behind. We need to talk." She turned around slowly, keeping her face unreadable. Mr. Thompson crossed his arms and let out a sigh. "Look, I don't know how things worked in your last job, but here we expect perfection. If you can't handle that, maybe this isn't the right place for you." Lisa met his gaze, but before she could respond, another employee walked in. It was Mr. Carter, a senior executive who had been with the company for years. He glanced between Lisa and Mr. Thompson before clearing his throat. "Mr. Thompson, the CEO just called for a last-minute meeting. You need to be there." Mr. Thompson frowned but nodded. "Fine. Lisa, we'll continue this conversation later," he muttered before leaving the room. Lisa watched him go, exhaling slowly. She had planned to keep her identity a secret for a little longer, but after today, she wasn't sure if she could. Her father had built this company from the ground up, and she had always admired his leadership. She wanted to prove that she could stand on her own without special treatment. But Mr. Thompson had pushed her patience to the limit. What would happen when he finally learned the truth? And more importantly, how would he react when he realized the woman he had been mistreating had more power than he ever imagined? Lisa sat at her desk, her mind racing. She had always known that working under Mr. Thompson wouldn't be easy, but she never expected him to be this cruel. His words lingered in her mind, but she reminded herself why she was here: to earn her place, not to rely on her father's name. She clenched her fists under the table, determined not to let him break her spirit. Meanwhile, in the CDO's office, Mr. Thompson walked in confidently, expecting just another routine meeting. But the moment he stepped inside, he noticed the serious expression on the CEO's face. Lisa's father sat behind his massive desk, reviewing a document with narrowed eyes. Mr. Carter, the senior executive, stood quietly in the corner, watching. Mr. Thompson hesitated for a second, then cleared his throat. "Sir, you called for me." Before her father could respond, Mr. Carter, who had been quietly observing, suddenly cleared his throat. "Actually, sir, there's something else you should know." He turned to Lisa. "You were the only one Mr. Thompson mistreated." Lisa's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" Mr. Carter folded his arms. "In the past year, we've had multiple resignations from this department. Talented employees left without much explanation. But after hearing what happened to you, I decided to dig deeper." He pulled out a folder and placed it on the CEO's desk. It turns out many of them left because of him. Mr. Thompson stiffened. "That's not true," he blurted out, but his voice lacked conviction. Lisa's father opened the folder, scanning the reports, his jaw tightening with each page. "So this wasn't just about my daughter," he muttered. "This is a pattern." Lisa turned back to Mr. Thompson, her expression unreadable. The room was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Mr. Thompson had thought he was untouchable, but now the truth was unraveling before him, and there was nowhere left to hide. The question now wasn't just about how he had treated Lisa, but how many others had suffered in silence before her. Mr. Thompson sat frozen, his usual confidence completely shattered. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came out. The evidence was right there: employee complaints, resignation letters, and reports of toxic leadership. He had spent years hiding behind his authority, thinking no one would challenge him. But now the truth had caught up with him. Lisa watched him closely, waiting to see if he would at least acknowledge the damage he had done. But instead, he clenched his jaw and shook his head. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I was just doing my job. If employees couldn't handle a little pressure, that's not my fault." Her father's expression darkened. "Mr. Thompson, leadership isn't about tearing people down. It's about bringing out the best in them. And from what I see, you have failed, again and again." The tension in the room was suffocating. Lisa glanced at Mr. Carter, who nodded slightly, silently reassuring her that they were doing the right thing. She took a deep breath. "I worked under you for months, and not once did you try to mentor me. You didn't push me to improve. You wanted to break me. And now I know I wasn't the only one." For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed Mr. Thompson's face. "I can fix this," he said quickly, his voice desperate. I can change. Give me another chance." The CEO sighed, shaking his head. "You had your chances, and you chose intimidation over leadership. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties." The words hit like a hammer. Mr. Thompson's face drained of color. "You're firing me?" Lisa's father stood. "No, I'm holding you accountable." Silence hung in the air as the weight of the decision sank in. Mr. Thompson sat motionless for a moment before standing abruptly. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Lisa exhaled, feeling a strange mix of relief and disbelief. It was over. But just as she started to process everything, Mr. Carter cleared his throat again. "Actually, sir, there's one more thing. Lisa and her father turned toward him, confused. Mr. Carter smiled slightly, looking directly at Lisa. I've been reviewing her work, and I think Lisa deserves more than just a position here. I think she's ready for leadership. Her father's eyes softened as he looked at her. Lisa felt her heart race. She had spent so long trying to prove herself, and now the opportunity she never expected was right in front of her. But was she ready to take it? Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Leadership? She had spent months just trying to survive under Mr. Thompson, never expecting that she would be offered something more. She glanced at her father, who studied her carefully, as if trying to gauge her reaction. Lisa, what do you think? He finally asked, his voice softer now. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of the moment sinking in. She had worked hard, not for recognition, but because she believed in what she was doing. The idea of stepping into a leadership role was daunting, but after everything she had been through, she knew one thing for certain: no one else should have to experience what she had. A small smile formed on her lips. If I take this role, I want to do it my way. I want to create a workplace where people feel valued, where they want to stay and grow. Mr. Carter nodded approvingly. That's exactly why I suggested it. We need leaders who lift others up, not tear them down. Her father smiled, pride clear in his eyes. Then it's settled. The news spread quickly through the office. Some employees were surprised, but many were relieved. They had seen how Lisa had carried herself, even under Mr. Thompson's harsh treatment. They knew she deserved this. As Lisa settled into her new role, she made it her mission to rebuild trust. She listened to employees, made necessary changes, and created an environment where everyone had the opportunity to grow. The office atmosphere shifted. People no longer walked on eggshells. Instead, they collaborated, supported each other, and thrived. Weeks later, Lisa stood by her father's office window, looking out at the bustling workplace. She had come in as just another employee, determined to prove herself. She had endured challenges, but in the end, she had gained more than just respect. She had found her voice. Her father walked up beside her. Proud of yourself? She turned to him with a smile. Yeah, I think I am. And for the first time in a long time, she truly felt like she belonged. The CEO didn't look up immediately. He took a deep breath and set the document aside before finally meeting Mr. Thompson's gaze. Yes, I've been hearing some concerns about how certain employees are being treated in your department. His voice was calm but firm. Care to explain? Mr. Thompson's posture stiffened. He knew better than to let his nerves show, so he forced a confident smile. Sir, I run a tight ship. I push my employees to be the best. If someone is struggling, I point it out. That's how we maintain high standards. The CEO nodded slowly, as if considering his words. I see. And does this approach include humiliating employees in front of their peers? Mr. Thompson's confidence wavered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. I only give constructive criticism, sir. Some employees need tougher guidance to succeed. Back in the office, Lisa overheard a few coworkers whispering near the break room. I heard the CEO is asking about Mr. Thompson, one said in a hushed tone. Another nodded. Makes sense. He's been brutal to Lisa lately. Maybe someone finally reported him. Lisa didn't react, but inside, she was torn. She never wanted special treatment, but maybe it was time for her father to see what was really happening. Would she let things play out, or was it time to step forward and reveal the truth herself? Lisa sat at her desk, pretending to focus on her work, but her mind was elsewhere. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The whispers around the office grew louder, and it was clear that something big was happening. She noticed the nervous glances from her coworkers, some looking at her with curiosity, others with quiet admiration. They knew what she had been going through, but no one had dared to step in until now. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office, Mr. Thompson was struggling to keep his composure. He could sense that something was off, but he still didn't fully understand why he had been called in. He straightened his tie and forced a confident smile, trying to appear in control. "Sir, if this is about a complaint, I assure you I've only done what's best for the company." Lisa's father leaned forward slightly, his eyes sharp. "Tell me, Mr. Thompson, do you even know who Lisa really is?" For the first time, Mr. Thompson hesitated. His mind raced, trying to piece things together. Why was Lisa suddenly at the center of this conversation? What did the CEO mean by who she really is? He let out a small chuckle, though there was a nervous edge to it. "She's a new employee, isn't she? Just another worker trying to find her place here." The CEO exchanged a knowing glance with Mr. Carter before turning his full attention back to Mr. Thompson. "Lisa is my daughter." Silence filled the room. Mr. Thompson's confident expression faltered, his face paling as the realization sank in. The arrogant, dismissive way he had treated Lisa, the public humiliation, the constant belittling. He had done all of that to the CEO's own daughter. Back in the office, Lisa's phone buzzed. It was a message from her father. Asterisk asterisk, come to my office. Now asterisk asterisk. Her heart pounded as she stood up. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, dreading, and anticipating all at once. As she made her way toward the CEO's office, all eyes were on her. The air was thick with tension. No one knew what was about to happen next, but everyone could feel that it was going to change everything. Lisa's heels clicked against the polished office floor as she made her way toward the CEO's office. The whispers had stopped now. Everyone was watching in silence, their eyes following her every move. She could feel the tension in the air, thick like a storm about to break. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. No matter what happened next, she had earned her place here, and she wasn't about to let Mr. Thompson or anyone else take that away from her. Inside the office, Mr. Thompson sat frozen in his chair. His mind was spinning, trying to process what he had just learned. Lisa, the same woman he had mocked, belittled, and treated like she was beneath him, was the CEO's daughter. He swallowed hard, his confidence now replaced with a creeping sense of dread. The door opened, and Lisa stepped inside. Her father gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, her gaze fixed on Mr. Thompson. He avoided her eyes, suddenly unable to meet them. The CEO's voice was calm but firm. "Lisa, I wanted you here for this conversation. You've worked hard without expecting any favors, and I respect that. But now that the truth is out, I think it's only fair that we discuss how we move forward." Lisa exhaled.